Okay, so let me share my screen really quick. Can you all see my screen?
Yep, it's got the agenda. Looks
all right,
good.
Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Marco Palacios, and I know on the under my picture it says Rod Soto, but today I kind of have to be Rod Soto because we only share one account, and he's the main subscriber for WebEx, and he is not able to join today. But he was able to provide me with the credentials to log in. So I'm going to impersonate Rod today, but just FYI, I'm Marco, and everybody knows me. So so today we have a very special event. So usually we meet monthly, and you know, and we have different topics for the new members who are to Pacific Hackers. We meet every month, and we try to do like one-on-one talks, unless there is some special events where we have speakers who are already working in the industry, and you know, they're taking times of their lives to come and share some of their knowledge. So for that, we actually thank you, Lodrina, for being here and share you know, some of your good information. It looks like it's going to be a wonderful presentation, so we look forward to listen to your presentation. Again, we usually meet at the MLK library here in San Jose, downtown San Jose, but obviously because of COVID, we were not able to. So, but we've been hearing rumors that, you know, DEF CON might be going in person. You know, I heard some rumors from the industry. You know, besides Las Vegas, for example, they already mentioned that they're going to be, you know, remote or online. However, DEF CON might be changing things, and if DEF CON decides to do something different, I'm pretty sure the others are going to follow. So just keep the eyes on you know, on Twitter, or if you're subscribed to their news and stuff like that, make sure you follow those. Again, you can join the Discord channel that we have. I think someone already posted the link, so thank you. And with that, I'm gonna present our today's event, which is Lodrina, and we couldn't do this without our very own Kevin. So Kevin, if you're on the channel, please, we want you to say some words, because you brought Lodrina, and we're very thankful for you to, you know, that you brought, you were able to make the connection, and you know, I don't know what else to say, but go ahead, Kevin, if you're during the conversation. I know you were in the channel. I saw your name, but not sure if he's available. Are you there? No? Okay.
Well, we might have lost him.
Okay, well, you know, Kevin, thank you again. If you can listen to us, I don't know if you can talk or something, but if you can listen to us, thank you so much for doing this, man. Kevin is also part of Pacific Hackers, and he does tremendous jobs bringing you know, professionals like you to provide this type of information to our members. So thank you. So with that, I'm gonna stop sharing, and I'm gonna have Lodrina you know, share her screen and start her presentation. So she mentioned that she wants the questions be asked towards the end, so please do not interrupt her during the presentation. So please hold your questions towards the end, and she will be more than happy to answer them. Okay. With that, Lodrina, thank you so much again, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marco, and thank you for everybody who's attending so far, for spending your Saturday with me. Let me get my screen shared. By the way, Marco, I just realized something, and tell me if I'm right or not. Is is the 101 logo both for the highway and for like 101 information? Am I reading this right or reading too much?
You know, we so it has different meanings, right? So yes, mainly the 101 logo was because of the Highway 101, which is, you know, across the Pacific, right? But then when we start, you know, creating, you know, ideas for the logo, we also say, well, 101 is not only the you know, the freeway. It's also our intention. You know, we're trying to provide you know, people who are looking to transition to the cybersecurity field or are interested and all that, you know, try to come up with presentations that is going to suit them, right? So the 101 also came for that. And then the thing, the zero, or in the logo, or the 5 dots there, that's from the hackers game from MIT. So that's from if you Google the hackers culture, you know, in Wikipedia, it shows the game that I'm talking about. And I think, but yeah, it has many definitions, but that's definitely one of them for sure.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I'm extra excited to be here with everybody. I was just sharing with our hosts before we officially kick things off that I grew up in the Bay Area. So I feel like I've been welcomed back home, and thank you for having me. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to share a little bit about myself, what I do in forensics, what I do for work. We'll talk careers in the field, but I'll leave plenty of time for questions for everybody at the end. So I'll share, first of all, I'll officially introduce myself. My name is Lodrina Cherne. I work at Cybereason, that's the owl on the right. We do endpoint detection and response, EDR, and endpoint protection, EPP. So we're really a company who's based here in Boston, where I'm coming in from today. And we really try and just protect people everywhere. And that's our mission, is to protect people in the open and connected world. But I was also sharing with our host, who knows that I teach for SANS Institute. So SANS has a wide variety of classes for people who are in the field or getting into the field of cybersecurity, whether it's defense and blue team or offensive operations, ethical hacking, pen testing, that kind of thing. You can take week-long classes in a number of different subjects, or even earn your master's degree through SANS. But I'm also doing a couple other projects, including working in policy. So I should say what I do for Cybereason is I sit in our office of the CISO. I work on policy and standards, and basically trying to make the cybersecurity world a better place. So you can reach me on Twitter. That's my name on Twitter is @hexplates. I'll have this information up at the end, including my email, if you want to reach out to me. But without further ado, I want to dive right into an introduction to digital forensics. So what is digital forensics, or I might call this DFIR? DFIR stands for Digital Forensics and Incident Response. And digital forensics is a branch of forensic science, and it deals with identification, preservation, analysis, and reporting of digital evidence. So now, if you are new to this world and you're maybe a crime show junkie like me, you might think of forensics as when they go into the big secure room and they zoom and enhance things on a screen. Well, forensics is definitely more than that. And think, digital forensics, so anything digital, whether it's a computer or host-based forensics, that's what I specialize in. You can also obtain digital evidence from cell phones, from networks, from the cloud, from connected vehicles. You know, the list really goes on, and there's really more places you can specialize every day. It's worth noting that the field is still fairly young. There was a really seminal report that came out just over 10 years ago called Strengthening Forensic Science in the United States. This came out from the National Academy of Sciences and talked about all kinds of different forensics. It talked about blood splatter, ballistics, dental forensics, but it really talked about computers and multimedia forensics as a field that, relative to all those other fields, which honestly are fairly new themselves in the grand scheme of science, computers as one that is still really evolving and changing and yet to be fully defined. And that's what I find exciting. So because I know this is supposed to be a 101 talk, a talk about getting started, a talk for beginners, while I can't teach you to do digital forensics in half an hour, I can teach you to identify on the computers you use, on your cell phone, when there might be data that can be recovered by a professional like me. So I'm going to give you a couple examples to think about. And as we go through these examples, you might start to see a pattern of things you'll recognize on your computer, on your cell phone, things that indicate there's data being left behind that a professional like me could come back in and recover. So let's start with this one, which is an example of Microsoft Office and Microsoft Word. So something that I use a lot in my work, which, by the way, when I'm doing my forensic investigations, I spent a decade looking into intellectual property theft. So, for example, somebody would leave a corporation, go to a competitor, and suddenly, if they were a salesperson, all of their clients might follow them. Or if they were an engineer, they might start developing a very similar tool at their new engineering company. And because things are looking a little funny, I'll often be hired to say, can you look at this former employee's computer? I think something strange happened. I think they took some data with them when they left. And one of the things I'll look at are documents that they recently used, recently opened. So here's one way that you can understand how I can come to recover that data. So when you open Microsoft Word, if you're a Word user and you have it set up with your default options, you might see something like what's on my screen, where Word will prompt you to open some of your most recently opened files. It might say, you opened this earlier today from this location. Do you want to open it again? This should be your clue that this information is being tracked. Now, for those of you who are familiar with this already, I'll try and give you a few nuggets of information about where this forensic artifact lives. So if this is all new to you, stick with the example I just gave you. There are going to be many more. If this is familiar to you, you're comfortable, maybe you've done a little bit of forensics, hopefully I can share with you that this information is stored in the ntuser.dat registry file. So in this database that is so crucial to the way our Windows computers work, if we're talking about Windows. However, it's also stored in other places as well. So again, I'll stick with Windows for now. If you're a Windows user and you go to your taskbar on the side of your screen and you right-click it, that's another place you can see your recent files pop up. And those are stored in a different place. Those are stored in an artifact called jump lists, and those have a relationship to shortcuts or link files or .lnk files. I'll use those terms interchangeably sometimes. And, you know, Office is really just a wealth of information because when you use Office, you might see something like the button I've just put up on my screen that says Recover Unsaved Documents. Okay, Recover Unsaved Documents as an option in this application is a pretty good indicator that this application is saving things even without you saying I want to save them, even without intending to do it. So when you start to see these things, think there's something under the hood, maybe in a location that I as a user can't readily access, but there's something under the hood that's tracking my information. So let's go on to our additional examples. Downloaded files. Now, somebody was asking a question about malware and files are safe or not, right when we started the session. What I have on my screen is a Word document with a yellow banner across the top. It says, be careful, files from the internet can contain viruses. And do you want to enable editing? Do you want to stay in protected view? So you might have seen this before. And if you think about when you've seen it, when you've opened a file with this banner, I am willing to bet that you never did anything to that file that says, classifies it and says, oh, this came from the internet, I better treat it in a safe way. No, your computer is doing this for you. And you'll see this on Macs. You know, you might not be able to run certain applications because of where it came from. So how does your computer know that this document came from the internet? Well, there's this little piece of information called an alternate data stream zone identifier, or ADS zone identifier. And it gets added to a file when it's downloaded from the internet, usually by your web browser. By the way, if you're a forensic examiner, certain web browsers will also include the URL that the file was downloaded from. So if you are downloading something from Gmail, and I want to come in after the fact, I see something's been downloaded from the internet, I wonder where you got it from. There's a good chance that I'll be able to go into this ADS zone identifier and see that it came from the internet, and then the URL it was downloaded from, including that it came from Gmail or whatever the site was. So I've got a whole lot more examples to share with you, but this is my favorite one to share. I'm going to see if I can open up the chat here. So I'm going to ask you what everybody thinks about this in just a moment. Okay, would it surprise you to know that incognito browsing or in private browsing leaves some traces of the websites you've been on your computer? So this can be across different browsers, whether it's Chrome, Edge, Firefox. But we're talking today about identifying forensic data. So I want everybody to take a minute, take a look at my screen, take a look at that browser window. I highlighted in red, it's an in-private browser window, but there is something else on this page, if you look really closely, that might tell you that your history is being tracked. So I'll give everybody a minute. I've got the chat open if anybody has any guesses. And just take a good look at that screen. How do you know your data is being tracked? All right, I have one guess, I have two guesses. I have to say, thank you folks who are responding so far. By the way, a couple of you are correct. Okay, I'll share it with everybody else. So on my screen, and you might have to know this is how this browser works, that these are darkened, that they're not grayed out. Excellent job in the chat. A couple people called this out. The mere fact that I can go backwards and forwards in this session, not just back, but also forwards, This tells me that within this tab, within this window, I've gone to a whole bunch of different websites before this one, after this one. And the mere fact that I can go forward and back and see what those websites are means that something is being tracked at some level. And because something is being tracked at some level means that if you are a professional like me, there is some chance of getting that information back. I have to say it's tricky, but there is a chance. So well done, everyone. Okay, folder opening is another big one here. So on my screen, I've got two different kinds of folders open. One is a list of files, and one are small icons. So if you are somebody like me who maybe wants to see my downloads or my documents folder as a list of files, and then I want to go into my photos folder, get all my vacation photos, and see them as a preview of tiny icons. Once I set that setting to be the way I want it to be, every time I go back to that folder, that's what the setting is going to be. So this should be your indication that there is something being tracked. And by the way, that something on Windows is an artifact called shellbags. So shellbags is kind of a funny word, and it's an artifact that I use all the time. Remember, think about my intellectual property theft investigations. What folders was somebody in? What folders did they know about? Did they know to go onto the company SharePoint and look in the folder confidential classified documents? So this is something that is incredibly valuable for me. You know, we're all about learning here. So I am going to take a detour for just 2 or 3 minutes and share with you something a little bit outside of forensics, but I think something that's important to many of us here. You know, we are all here as InfoSec professionals or people who want to get into the field, and we have the virtue of being able to do that by those who come before us. So in honor of that, in my examples you've seen so far, and particularly on this page, I've included some women of computing, women who've been instrumental in the history of computing, in the development of cryptography and security. And if you have a moment and are interested in finding out more about these incredible women, take a screenshot, take a picture of this screen, and look them up. In fact, there's one woman in particular that I want to call out, and I'm going to share a little bit of her story with you. And that would be Becky Bass, who passed away 4 years ago, actually March, 4 years ago. So this is the anniversary of her passing. I want to share a little bit with everybody about Becky Bass because we're recording this at a time. Content warning, I will say one sentence about this and then move on. We're recording this at a time, March 2021. We've just experienced and seen incredible violence in Atlanta, Georgia, against people of Asian heritage. And that is one reason in particular I thought it was really important to highlight Becky's story. So let me tell you a little bit about her. Rebecca Gurley Bass was known as the den mother of intrusion detection. She was also known as Info Mom. She was born in Alabama, so she was a US citizen of Japanese heritage. Her mom was Japanese. And when she went to college in 1973, she was the only woman at her University of Alabama at Birmingham program in engineering. Only one. She later went on in her professional career to work for Xerox. And Xerox's main headquarters is just up the road from many of you in Palo Alto. So I believe she was at Xerox PARC before she went on to the NSA in the National Computer Security Center. There she was particularly able to advocate for women and minorities in her work. And she was also technically very excellent. She received the NSA Distinguished Leadership Award during her time there. She later went on to be the Deputy Security Officer at Los Alamos National Lab. She was a venture capitalist later in life, and she also wrote a number of books that are seminal to the field, including the title Intrusion Detection, and she co-wrote a guide to forensic testimony. She was later credited with building the FBI's first computer crime squad. But more than anything else, she is remembered fondly as somebody who cared about people. And in my doing research about Becky's life, to share that with you all, there were a number of quotes that stood out to me about her work. So I wanted to put one up on the screen. And I will also share that her legacy lives on at basesecurity.org. So you can check out BACEsecurity.org to learn more about her work and her legacy. Okay, so I'd like to thank everybody for allowing me to share that story. And I think hopefully that's why I'm here, and hopefully that's why you're here, is to hear some stories, to learn something. So I'll try to pivot back to technical information. All right, and I'm going to jump back in somewhat where we left off. Remember I was talking about folder previews and getting information from folders you've been in? Well, when we create these little file previews, these little icons, these are things that are stored on your system. They're stored in an artifact on Windows called, it's either the thumb cache or the thumbs.db file. Mac OS has a very comparable artifact to this as well. But you should have some indication, especially if you've been using computers for years and years. Think about downloading photos from your vacation or having a giant folder full of lots of photos. And maybe you're opening that folder for the first time. The first time you do that, it takes quite a while for all of those little icons to be generated, especially when you think about back in the day when our computers were slower than they are now. But then every other time you go into that folder, it loads a little bit faster. Certainly much faster than the first time. So that should be your hint to yourself. You should be thinking, okay, there's something here that's being cached, something that's being saved. And by the way, even if, you see I called this folder, very cheekily, I called it delete this folder. Even if I delete that folder, I try and remove the files from my hard drive, somewhere on disk, I should still be able to get these little icons, these little photos back in my analysis. Now, I'll go into a few more technical artifacts. One is from the system usage panel. When you Control-Alt-Delete, you bring up your task manager on Windows. The mere fact that we can delete our usage history, how many CPU cycles, how many bytes have been pushed over the network, the mere fact that we can delete this information means that it's being stored. Usually for 30 days, it can be up to 60, on disk in an artifact called the System Resource Utilization Management Database. So I'm getting into some more advanced artifacts here, but you might be thinking to yourself, and you might even be able to identify now, when we had our time change just recently, that your computer knew to change its clock, and if you're paying attention to your clock, that there is something about your computer that's tracking your location, this might lead you to believe, okay, there are date and time settings that know where I am, can figure out where my time zone is, so somewhere that's being stored that I, for example, am in Eastern time right now. Been mentioning Macs throughout this, but Now I'll give everybody on a Mac an example that's just for you. If in your house or in your office, you share thumb drives between a Mac computer and a Windows computer, if you start at the Mac, then you go over to Windows, you might see something like this. Files that begin with dot something and .ds store is a big one. These are all kinds of indexing files that your Mac is doing just behind the scenes, tracking the files, tracking what volumes, tracking all kinds of things on your Mac, again, to be more user-friendly. That's why Windows is doing everything that Windows is doing. It's trying to be user-friendly, it's trying to speed up our user experience. But by the way, because Macs and Windows see things slightly differently on our file systems, when you plug that hard drive into a Windows computer, you kind of see these auxiliary Macintosh files that are doing all this background tracking. But let's go on to phones now. So I have a fairly unique name. I've never met another Lodrina out there. And every time I get a new phone, I type in my name, I spell it out, and I have to teach my phone, no, my name is not spelled incorrectly. I want you to remember this. Get rid of the red squiggly line. Once I tell my phone that, then it knows what to do from then on. It remembers that my name is my name. So this should be your clue if you've had to spell something unique or something that's not in your dictionary, that there is a dictionary on your mobile phone. And not only a dictionary, there's predictive text oftentimes. So your phone will try and identify what word you want next because it's tracking what words you use in sequence. As you're typing out words sometimes, because it tracks that order, I can go back in and perhaps see what words you typed in what order. And as you see on the screen, that can not look good depending on what you've been doing on your phone. Typically, by the time I get there, it's because something not good is happening. So those were all of the examples I had to share today. I know that we're going to pivot into career questions in a few minutes and questions about this content. But for those of you who think this all sounds really interesting, I love crime scene shows, I love mysteries, I love digging into all the different settings on my computer. If you want to work in the digital forensic field, here's a few things that you will want to remember. First, about all the examples I've shared today, if it's remembered for you, it can be recovered. What I'm sharing next, these next few slides, these are things that I took screenshots of to remind myself to look up. Because every time our systems upgrade, there's no corresponding book or pamphlet or manual. That is, here's the latest version of Windows and what it means for forensic examiners. You need to be aware of what features exist so you can try and recover the data that's associated with them. So when I see that sticky notes is upgrading and it can sync across devices, I'm wondering where that data is stored. Is it on disk? Is it in the cloud? And again, we're back to when Office is saving information for us. So it's remembered for you, it can be recovered. And if you want to work in the field, it's really this scientific process that's important to you. So if you had science in middle school or in high school, and you learned the scientific method, you know, observing what's going on, coming up with a hypothesis, test, and then share your findings. Maybe your test doesn't come out the way you want it. Go back and do something else. Do it again. So these are really going to be your most crucial skills going into the field. That and your curiosity will take you very, very, very far. I do want to talk about careers in digital forensics, but how about this? Let me pause first. I'll stop sharing my screen for a minute. And that way I can better bring up the chat window and see what questions you all have about forensic data. So I'm going to scroll back up through the chat right now and see what questions I can identify. But if you had a question earlier, or if you've been holding a question about forensics until now, please put it in the chat so that I can see it and we can get your questions addressed. Okay, and I saw a question earlier. I think this probably had to do when I was talking with incognito browsing data. Somebody asked what companies are doing this, who's tracking your information when you're in an in-private session. So this is something that everybody here can test out. You don't even have to be on a computer. You can use your smartphone to do it. If you open up an incognito session, you can see that for every tab you're in, you go forward 10 websites, you go back a few, click the back arrow, go forward again. Well, you know that somewhere there's at least 10 websites that are tracked. Now there's a bunch of disclaimers, and in fact they pop up usually when you open that first in private or incognito window. You know, if somebody's monitoring your traffic on the network, if somebody has additional software that's monitoring websites on your system, yes, that can be tracked, but you as a user should be empowered to know that that information is there. And you can do that just by testing out different browsers. And then try this. Open an in-private session, log into some site that you use. Like, for example, me, I'm a Gmail user. Now open another tab in that session where I've got my Gmail in one, and in a second tab, I can still pull up my Google Calendar, I can pull up my Google Drive. So this to me means that even across tabs in a single in-private session, I know that there's something in that browser, not just in the tab, but in that session, that is sharing my information, that cookies are shared with other tabs in that session. So, by the way, this might mean different things for different people. You know, if you're somebody who is in a really vulnerable position and you are trying to use a home computer to look up health information, and you really cannot risk, you know, on your life, anybody else on your home computer, knowing that you looked up that health information. You know, that's a different risk model and that's a different threat model than you're at work and you want to know if your employer can track your incognito browser shopping activity on your lunch break. So these are a couple of things that you can test out and try out, and it'll mean different things to different people. So, all right, I'm going back into the chat and I'm checking out. Oh, a bunch of questions have come in. Thank you all for the questions. Let's see. So there's a question about forensics outside of federal work and government work. I'll share with you that I have worked really just in the private sector. I've supported federal, state, local law enforcement investigations at certain times. But I have to say the field is growing and there is plenty of work across all of these different varieties that I've talked about so far. Let's see. Oh, can I get rid of cached information? So all of the information that I've shared with you so far, how can I get rid of that? Okay, this is a great question. So I'm going to say that I have looked at computers where somebody has downloaded programs to try and cover their tracks, some kind of evidence eliminator, evidence killer. They've all got great names. I'm going to share with you that very few of them are effective at covering up all of these tracks that I'm sharing with you today. And maybe that should be your takeaway for those of you who don't want to work in the field, those of you who are wondering, how does this affect me? It is very, very, very hard to remove all of this information from your system. I would say knowing that information, depending on what you're doing, would you be comfortable with somebody coming in and recovering it? And are they likely to? If it's your home computer and kids trying to cover up their activity versus me coming in and working, $1 million data theft. There are probably different resources that are going to be tasked with investigating those. So hopefully that helps. Okay, I see a few more about forensic information. Reporting on information. Who is best to open up this discussion and examples? There are many forensics communities online. There are websites like Forensic Focus. I'll put this in the chat in the bottom here. So there's a website called forensicfocus.com, for example, that has a good bulletin board, discussion board. I'm going to share, for those of you who aren't on Twitter, Twitter is probably the most up-to-date, thriving, both beginner and advanced community online that I know of. And if you use the hashtag DFIR, so hashtag, I'll put this in our chat, hashtag DFIR, that will connect you with a lot of people who are talking about reporting, talking about artifacts and different things. So let's see. There's a couple career questions. I'm going to come back to you. And I see another one about artifacts. Let's see. If digital forensics is being used in a criminal investigation, what type of evidence can be seen from the data Microsoft collects with Windows 10 telemetry, assuming the user had it to the lowest setting? Excellent question, really good question. So let me talk a little bit about Microsoft and data collection, and I'll reiterate again why Microsoft is collecting what it does. So Microsoft is really collecting what it does to really give you a good user experience. So every system, and I see a question about Linux in there as well, even questions about Tor somebody just asked. Every operating system, every program, even Tor, that's an application very focused on user privacy, still wants to be user-friendly. So that's why Microsoft and Mac OS and your phones are collecting information about you. And even if you used Windows 10 on the most, let's say, non-cloud way possible, non-connected to the internet kind of way, a lot of the files and settings I talked about, they really cannot be disabled. They're there for diagnostic purposes. And while you can minimize the amount of information that's being stored, to try and turn off all of those features would render your computer unusable. So, there are some things you can do, like I know somebody's going to ask if you did something like a Linux boot disk to run your OS. Great option. There are lots of people in privacy and security who use that. So depending on your level of paranoia, depending on the level of effort you want to go to cover up your information, I would say, you know, it depends on your comfort level and, again, your threat level. Good questions. Thank you. Okay, as we are live, I want to acknowledge we're at the top of the hour. I can stay for another 15 or so minutes, so let's spend the next 15 minutes talking about career information. So maybe I can share my screen again. Okay. And I'll start with sharing a little bit about my story. I don't have any slides in particular prepared, so how about this? I'll leave it on my contact information. So those of you who are interested can take down my information, check out the places. I am online if you have any questions. But a little bit about my story is that, as I mentioned earlier, I grew up in the Bay Area. I was there during the first .com boom, and I was quite young working in the industry. But, you know, I was never somebody who really felt comfortable going straight into the workforce after high school. I knew that college was in my future. I am a first-generation college graduate. I'm also a first-generation high school graduate, and we can go back a little bit more beyond that. So if any of you are in that position, you know, I am there with you and very proud of it, and hope that you are proud of yourselves as well. So as the child and daughter of immigrants, it was always drilled into me that college is something that I would go to, and whatever I did with my career after that, great, but I would get a college education. So at the time I went to college, it was computer science. If you were interested in all things technical. And my computer science career involved a lot of programming, which I did not like, did not enjoy. My path through college involved a lot of math, which I was a little bit interested in when we got to topics like cryptography. But by the time I was done with my college career, I knew that I didn't want to be a programmer. And I effectively graduated, even though my degree says computer science, I effectively graduated with a math degree. And I spent some time, I went to school in Boston. I'm still in Boston to this day. I was lucky enough to take advantage of some of the resources of higher education in the area. I was able to pursue continuing education, going to night school at places like Harvard and Northeastern. I looked into things like technical writing. I looked into and thought about teaching, which, as you know, I'm now doing for SANS. So you can find my classes I teach at sans.org. But was really trying to figure out what me, as somebody who was interested in security, somebody who considered myself as somebody having the hacker mindset, what do I do with myself if I didn't want to be a programmer? So the security industry existed. It was still fairly nascent. And I was lucky enough to take a class at Harvard's night school in security and technology policy and law, which really interested me. That class was taught by somebody who was a retired FBI agent. And I feel very fortunate at this early stage in the computer industry and the forensic industry that I happened upon somebody who retired in the field of forensics. So she really opened my eyes to what the field was. And now the field of forensics is much wider. You can get an undergraduate degree, master's degree, PhD, or certificates in forensics. You can get lots of on-the-job training. But then the field was still quite early. And the only place in the area that was offering forensics classes was my local community college. So I came out of my bachelor's degree program, wandered around a bit, started taking classes at my local community college, and that's really what started my career. And it was there that I met the people that I would go on to work for the next decade and beyond. So those of you who have gone to school and don't work in your field, or are looking to change, or maybe never went to school, hopefully this shows you there's lots of ways to get into the field, whether we're talking forensics or we're talking security, and you know, lots of ways to pivot your career even beyond that. So I hope hearing a little bit about my journey helps some of you who are thinking about this field or thinking about changing into fields. And I'm going to go back to the chat. I'm going to review some of the career questions I saw in there. So let's see. There's a question about what would be a good entry-level job for a college student in the forensics field. Great question. There is one issue that makes it really hard to get into the field, which is forensics jobs might not always say digital forensics in them. So this goes for your entry-level college student, career changer, whoever you are. You might find roles that say forensic analyst. It might say security analyst. It might say media exploitation, especially if you're looking at federal roles and contractor roles. The best thing I can tell you realistically looking for a job in the forensics field is I consider forensics and digital forensics and DFIR as part of the defense side of cybersecurity. And you might see roles or related jobs in defense or in blue team, and anywhere that you can get your foot in the door to do any kind of security analyst work or forensics work, you know, whether it's an entry-level job or an internship, you're going to have to look at titles really carefully and look at descriptions. But getting familiar with some of the forensic websites that I've mentioned earlier will really help you out there. So I hope that answers the question. There were a few about getting an entry-level job out of college or somebody who might want to join the field. Let's see. Oh, somebody mentioned Ncase down below, which is a forensics software platform. Let me take a little detour into forensics and getting a job now that I see the term Ncase. One great hack to find career jobs is to find keywords that are often used in the field. So sometimes employers will ask for, do you know Ncase? Do you know magnet tools? Do you know tools from Eric Zimmerman? Do you have a SANS GCFE certification, which is the certification that my class is associated with? Now, you don't necessarily need to have all of those skills, but once you start identifying certain keywords, that should help you out quite a bit. Okay, and I think we're coming back to forensic data questions, which is great as well. Okay. Oh, and more about Windows 10 telemetry. Yeah. So I'm going to share to the person who asked the question, thank you for that question. So when we talk about Windows 10 telemetry, that is something that I try to set at a very low level on my own systems. So when you set up Windows for the first time, it will ask you to log in with a Microsoft account, a live account. I try my best to avoid all of those settings as well. And even though I never use Cortana, it still somehow pops up on many of my systems and tries to get me to use voice commands. Let me think about this question a little bit more. Okay. So the question that was asked about Windows 10 telemetry, I will share that I have not looked at Windows 10 data stored in the cloud that relates to telemetry specifically. I will say there was some data I shared earlier about the SRUM. I think this is my most useful artifact. I'll go back to it so I can talk a little bit more about it. So the Windows SRUM is that database that comes up when you press Control-Alt-Delete and you go to your task manager. This one here. This one is incredibly, incredibly useful for finding very, very granular information. You can see as a user, if you go into this, and you can add additional columns over here on the right. You can add additional information to your view, like number of bytes being written to disk, number of bytes sent, amount of data being pushed over the network. So I'll share with you, there's one example I go through when I teach, which is a user who tried to cover up his tracks, tried to avoid any suspicion, tried to tamper with evidence by changing date and time settings and doing all kinds of wacky things. And in this lab that I teach, we look at this artifact and we find an application that was installed, a file sharing application, that supposedly is no longer on disk, that supposedly was never on disk. The amount of traffic it sent over the network, and based on some other artifacts associated with this, where the person was sitting, what Wi-Fi network they were using, and where in the world they were. So I find the SRUM super, super powerful because of the reasons I just shared. We can see incredibly granular, useful information, and in my mind, I consider this telemetry. I don't know if it exactly fits the original intent of the question, but this is the kind of low level stuff that even if you went and pressed delete and tried to clear this out, could still be carved for, could still be found in volume shadow copies, and is really a gold mine. So I hope that that gives you a little bit more to chew on. And let's see. A few other things here. Go into some more questions. Oh, and one more clarification. Thank you. Telemetry sent back to Microsoft. Yeah, I will in fact double down on my talking about the SRUM artifact, because you do need to enable this setting. It is very easy to enable accidentally, but SRUM data can be sent to Microsoft, and we can find much more of it, much more history related to it if that's enabled. Let's see what else. And depending on what you're thinking about, there might be things that surprise you, like if you use spell check. This is absolutely telemetry. If you use spell check or grammar check in Microsoft Word, even if it is Word installed to your computer, not run from the cloud, Microsoft Word will be sending parts of your data and be sending telemetry to Microsoft to be able to do your spell check and in particular grammar check. Let's see. And one more question from somebody who's exploring the field. By the way, I'm omitting names just for the sake of this recording, just for everybody's privacy. So that is why I am omitting names here as I read through questions. So I think this might be the last or second to last question, unless one more comes in. So the question is, several years ago when I explored this area, I knew EnCase was the leading tool used by investigators. So who are the leading tools today or leading companies? Great question. Thank you. EnCase is still a big player in forensic suites. So is Magnet Forensics, so is Black Bag, so is FTK. Everything that I'm naming off, these are big suites. So when I say suites, I mean tools that ingest a lot of data and give you a good 30,000-foot view of a computer system. Now, a lot of the things I've shared with you today are best investigated with purpose-specific tools. So if you are looking at the SRUM, or you are looking at shortcuts or jump lists, there is going to be a specific tool out there for that. And as another comment, very astutely noted in the chat, every big tool that gives you that 30,000-foot view has its blind spots. So we can go in with these specialized tools depending on what you're looking at. And if you haven't looked at the field in quite a while, I would stress tools from Eric Zimmerman. Eric Zimmerman also teaches forensics for SANS. He teaches courses that are both more basic and more advanced than the one that I teach. But he's a former FBI agent and investigator, and now is lucky enough to, now that he is outside of the FBI, developing his tools for all of us to use. Okay, so let me take one more last question since we're at a quarter past the hour of this session. And thank you for the one more question I just got in. Are there any beginner software programs or subjects to focus on for people who are just getting into the field and developing an interest? Good question. So if you're just getting into the field, reading about it, following folks on Twitter, again, hashtag DFIR will lead you to a lot of those people. That would be for reading. And then you'll find a bunch of blogs off of there as well. Beginner software programs. There are lots out there. The Eric Zimmerman ones I mentioned, there's a lot of blog posts and videos about. There's one other one that I want to mention, which is not a specific software program, but something you can do. If you are following DFIR blogs and maybe following DFIR Twitter, maybe the hashtag on LinkedIn, you might see opportunities for DFIR capture the flags coming up. So these might be something that says, if you're not familiar with the term, I'm going to type it into the chat, CTFs, or capture the flag. So in a capture the flag type game, there's often opportunities to get some sample evidence, maybe some suggested tools. And as part of this game, as part of the CTF, you'll be asked questions about the evidence. And usually there's beginner level questions and maybe hints you can take to try and figure out and explore in a somewhat structured way. So those of you who are just getting started, again, I can't stress enough how much information is shared on Twitter. If you're not a social media person, you don't have to interact and chat with people. I think it would be to your benefit if you do, but you can just watch the hashtag, watch it on LinkedIn, and find blogs and people from there. And somebody just shared a great site in the chat. I think that's a good one for me to end on. The site they shared is dfirdiva.com. So she has a site for getting into DFIR. And that's a great place to start as well. Thank you for sharing that. So I know I've been talking for almost an hour. I want to end it here and be respectful of everybody's time and weekend, but I did share my contact information earlier on the screen. So you can best reach me on Twitter or through email. Any other methods, I might not check as much. I might be on different Slacks or a Discord here and there if you see my name. I probably won't see that for months. So again, please find me on Twitter. Please email me. And any other questions I didn't get to, or people who are interested in getting into the field, if you reach out to me there, I look forward to hearing from you. And just please mention that you are here in this session, so I remember what we talked about and where to pick up the conversation.
Well, Lodrina, thank you so much. This was an awesome presentation. Definitely, I learned a lot, even though I'm already in the industry, but I definitely learned something new, and I'm pretty sure the others have as well. We have Kevin finally show up. He had some issues, with audio. So, Kevin, I'll give you the floor before we end the session.
Great. Thanks, Lodrina. That was amazing. And I hope everybody enjoyed it. And this is amazing. A lot of information. So digital forensics is so amazing in itself. So there's a lot to cover. But I think you touched on the highlights. So we appreciate that. And we're looking forward to maybe having a capture the flag, Lodrina. What do you think? That would be something interesting to embark on. I think that would open up the kind of people's eyes a little bit too. I've used autopsy and some of the others, but that's just scratching the surface, because I know in mobile forensics it can get pretty interesting. Especially, I had an opportunity to go to Drive Savers here in the Bay Area, up in Nevada, and they have a whole lab, and they were talking about how they do mobile forensics, and some of the cases were quite mind-blowing, because they had to recover from a phone that was like water damaged, and basically the person tried to destroy evidence and some other stuff like that, and they were actually able to recover some text messages, which was very essential for a case that they were working on. But I wanted to, personally say thanks for everybody coming out, and truly enjoyed it again, Lodrina. I have heard you speak before, so, hearing you, talk again about your passions and sharing base security was really, that was the first time. So thanks. I remember some of those little tidbits of history, but we gotta emphasize how much history there is out there, and this was a great opportunity for us to educate other people as well. And I'm going to end it on the note of just hoping everybody's families are safe and you're doing well. But if you would love to learn more about, like Lodrina said, there's Twitter, all the handles, and I do say, it can get overwhelming, but there's tons of Discord channels as well, and we share some resources too on our site. But with that being said, I'm going to hand it back over to Marco and Lodrina. Again, thank you. A big round of applause to you, and very much appreciated. And that's kind of everything I wanted to say right now.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, thank you everyone for spending the past hour plus with me and for the great questions.
No, again, thank you so much, Lodrina, for taking time out of your busy schedule and meeting with us. So stay safe. And for our members, we have next month another great meeting on Kubernetes security. And we hope to see you there, and stay safe, follow your local guidelines. And, this is almost over. So just keep the fight, Thank you all, and have a good weekend.
All right. Have a good weekend, everybody.